Sharman Blackman and a number of Guyanese artists doing their piece, My Native Land, and that's what we're going to be talking about. His native land and what he plans to do for Guyana. It's 58 minutes past the hour. The second eastbound double lane on the Demerara Harbour Bridge in progress, and it will change in just a few moments to traffic flowing in both directions. But let me say good morning and welcome to 104.1 Litefm. If you've just joined us, we've got quite a number of persons online. If I go to my monitoring of who is listening and where, we've got close to about plus 2,000 persons locked in about 20 countries. So wherever you are, thank you so much for being a part of this, and welcome to our conversation with Attorney at Law Nigel Hughes. Correct salutation, but he's also the leader of the Alliance for Change, vying for the presidency of Guyana. Well, with that introduction of some good steel pan music from one of our local panmen, let me take this opportunity and say good morning to Mr. Hughes. Welcome to Light FM.
Good morning, Bobby.
I'll tell you what, just pull your microphone down a little bit. Yes, all right, he got you better there. And thank you for joining us here.
No, Bobby, thank you so much for having me on the program. This is a privilege. It's a first in person. I've been on your program before. By telephone.
That's
but
correct.
Thank you. And let me just commend you on the good work you do.
Thank you so much.
This is the only radio station I'm allowed to listen to in my house.
Well, I was going to, say that, but since you said it, then I don't need to elaborate much on it. But let me tell you, we hadn't done no discussion except what I said to the listeners, the format of the program this morning. So we will give you the opportunity for about 5 to 10 minutes to make an opening statement. I've got some questions I would like to ask, and then we'll open up the lines for listeners who may want to ask you questions as well. And I'm sure you don't have any fear of answering questions. So it's yours. Take it away.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for affording me this opportunity. 10 minutes is a long time. But, Bobby, this is perhaps going to be the most consequential election that we have faced in the last 20 years in Guyana. I suspect the one that is perhaps of equal or greater significance would have been way back in 1964, and then we had the 1992 elections and perhaps 2015. Now, Guyana, since 2020, December 2019, has changed its entire economic circumstances. We commenced commercial production in December 2019, and I want to premise this by I would like people to understand the magnitude of the good fortune that we have in terms of the income from wealth, because on that basis you can then have a look at the disparities and the unequal distribution or benefits from that. So right now, in the last week and a half, last 10 days, we have gone up to 900,000 barrels of oil a day. That's more than 1 barrel per citizen of Guyana on any estimate, whether you think we are 750,000, whether you think we're 800,000. We are now producing, as soon as a baby is born, that baby is entitled to 1 barrel per day. Well, not entitled, that's what we're producing. And so the question is, how, now that we have been given an opportunity to rebalance and restructure our country, our nation, the nation of Guyana, it is, how are we going to do that? So we got a couple of key things that are on here. One of them is that a significant part of this country is excluded from this amazing wealth that we have. The World Bank figure for poverty in Guyana is 48%. But even more scary than that is the World Health Organization's position on child food poverty. 20%, 1 in 5 of our children is living in extreme child food poverty. What that means, that 1 in 5 children is not getting the basic nutrients on a daily basis to sustain themselves. 40%, this is World Health again, are living in child poverty. Those are startling statistics because we have had the benefit of the commercial production of oil since 2020. And in 2025, we have not affected that figure. So one of the primary concerns, I think, for any country going forward, especially Ghana, is how are we going to level up and remove people from poverty? That's one. Two, given the wealth that we are experiencing now, clearly we have to build a modern Guyana. It can't be the old structure. It has to be a new structure. And the new structure means we have to build a country that will move Guyana from where it is now, middle income, to top of the first world. And the reason why I say top is because it's relatively easy. We have a lot of money coming in, we have a very minuscule population, and we have a huge country geographically. So if you think in terms of company sizes, if you had 800,000 employees, that's not the largest company in the world. That's probably a medium-sized company. You've got more land space than necessary, 83,000 square miles. And just purely on a numbers game, how difficult is it to move people from extreme food poverty up to the highest quality services that the state can provide over the next 5 to 10 years? So the second question is, how do we build this new economy? And fundamental to that are the institutions, because any successful country needs institutions. And third, what is the most important aspect of development that will move people realistically out of poverty other than just writing them a check? And that is education. And I just briefly want to say to you why education is important. The economy in Guyana for the next 15 years at a minimum, possibly up to 25 years, will be driven by oil, even as we develop the non-oil sector. To get a job in any oil-related discipline, you have to be either skilled or semi-skilled. Now, that means that unless Guyanese get into that category of skilled and semi-skilled, they're not going to be employable in the new environment. And so one of the most important figures that we need to take into account, and this is again official, this is PRIA's figure, 48% of our children are dropping out of secondary school. In other words, they don't finish it. So, and that's every year. So what's happening to that 48%? They just end up moving around without qualifications. So for us, education is the primary product. We want to capture those young people who might not have finished the system, as well as enhance the skills of those who have finished the system. And so we have to start off by getting all our children into school. So free transportation, not giving citizens money to get their children to school. The state will provide the buses, the boats, the bicycles, the ATVs, and the tractors that will take every child in this country who wishes to avail themselves of it to school at the cost of the state. 2, when they get into school, you clearly don't want hungry children. So every child in this school and every school in the country will have a cafeteria, and every school will have a menu that has the highest nutrient content, and we meaning the state, will provide 2 meals per day. So the kids will get to school and they will be fed in school so that they will be in a position to learn and absorb. 3, we know that historically people quite often are embarrassed because they can't afford to send their children to school in uniforms or proper shoes simply because they just can't afford it. And so the state will provide uniforms for every student in the country. And fourthly, every parent of every child will get $75,000 per term per child, because we want to make sure that every single child in this country gets the same opportunity. And when they're in school, there'll be an intranet in which every student, whether they're in Ishalton in the south, whether they're in Baramita in the west, or whether they're in Karivitan in the east, or Georgetown in the north, they will have access to all the school materials they need to be able to allow them to enjoy their best talents. So that is critical to building a modern society. So if they were entering school now, over the next 10 years, you would see them enjoy that, and you would have a completely different country. The second important thing about education is this. We are going to set up what's probably the equivalent of a modern-day voluntary, and I emphasize voluntary, national service called the National Skills Academy. What will happen is persons who have not finished school as well as those who want to get qualified in relevant areas for future production for Ghana, which will be essentially oil and gas, construction, and some related areas, can go into this academy, identify which courses they want to do. They'll be trained for 10 months to a year. At the end of it, they'll be examined. They will qualify. They will get certified. And then the state will do one of two things. If you want to get a job in a specific industry, once you're certified, the state will find that employment based on your qualifications and your marks. Or alternatively, if you want to start your own business, what will happen is the state will give you the tools to that business. So, for example, harnessing, which is part of scaffolding for offshore, as one of the offshore industries, we will give you your harnesses. If you're in welding, we'll make sure you get your startup welding kit. And then we will give you the financial support and advice, advice. Because we know running a business is not just simply having the idea. You have to come up with a business plan, and then you have to enforce various regimes to make sure you're successful. So the state will provide financial advisors who will hold your hand during the first 2 years. But the best thing about that program is that we know that you will be away from your family for that period of time, and therefore the state is actually going to pay you. You're actually going to get a stipend which will allow you to keep your family supported while you're being trained. This allows us to level up, to bring more people up into the stage where they're either employable or they can run their own businesses. The final thing I want to talk about, and there are many things, but I'm sure in the questions you'll get to them, but I want to talk about owning a piece of this country. The price of land in Guyana is ridiculous. An acre of land on the East Bank, if it's on the riverside, is now going for somewhere around $1 million US. What is already happening in Georgetown is the gentrification of Georgetown. In other words, people who have a lot of resources, and that includes people who are not Guyanese, are buying up prime lands, and they're putting up, as they should, it's an investment, hotels and other businesses and several high rises. What that does, especially when you come to South Georgetown, is it forces people out of the city because people are going to come and buy that land, and after a while, no Guyanese is going to be able to really afford land in the communities in which they used to live. They're going to be pushed away from the center, pushed further, probably up the highway, further away. Nothing wrong with that if you have those services there. So what we have decided is, look, the oil that was found in this country belongs to every Guyanese, and it has been paid in full in advance by our ancestors, by their contribution to this country. And to make sure every single Guyanese has a stake, owns a piece of this country, we are introducing the policy that once you turn 18 years of age, you will get a house lot. You don't have to buy it, you will get it. Because then you have a stake in the country. You as a Guyanese, by virtue of being born here and being a Guyanese citizen, will have a stake in the country, and you will be entitled to that house lot. Now, we're not just going to give you a house lot in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the swamp, or in the middle of the rainforest. We're going to make sure that the communities in which you receive those house lots have the latest modern amenities, utilities, clearly drainage. But most importantly, we must stop building housing communities that don't have parks, that don't have walkways, that don't have facilities for exercise, for gym. Because to have a holistic, successful country, you need to have all the modern amenities. And that's going to be the theme of our modern development. We're not giving people 5,000 square feet per house lot. It's going to be a minimum of 7,500 to 10,000 square feet because we have the land available. We just have to develop the plans. And if people think this costs a lot, and I'm just going to go to the education as an example, we have 205,000 students in the country. If you multiply that by if the average meal, high value, nutritious meal is somewhere around $1,000, $1,200 to produce, it's not very much. You're talking about maybe 200-300 million Guyana dollars. And I know you're going to come to the cost of living, but we have extraordinary measures for the cost of living. I don't know if I'm close to my 10 minutes. Am I?
No, you're going
right.
good.
Okay.
You got the time.
So cost of living is the number one item on everybody's agenda in Guyana. So here's the question about how do you reduce the cost of living? And I'm going to use an example, a belanger. If you plant a belanger and you grow it in a farm somewhere in the country, let's say it costs you $20 a belanger, that Boulanger magically changes from $20 on the farm to $120 or $100 when it gets to market. So clearly somewhere between the production of the Boulanger and the sale of the Boulanger in the market, that's where that huge cost comes that is leading to a lot of the very high prices in the marketplace. You go on a pumpkin, it's $4,000. So what the government has to do to be able to protect its citizens is subsidize the cost of moving goods from where, and this food and vegetables, from where they're grown to the marketplace. So the government, an AFC government, will provide those subsidies, whether it does it by way, it will do it by way of a blend of actually providing the commercial vehicles to move produce from the farms to the marketplace. So that brings the price down, and the government clearly will know what it costs per pound to move goods, because you know what the price of gas is, etc. Secondly, because people are taking advantage of the increased disposable income in the country, the government is going to have to intervene and get into the business of food security. So it's going to have to buy produce and release produce onto the market when the prices start to go out of whack. So you know, for example, that a reasonable profit at 30% if you move a Boulanger from the market to the at $20 at the farm to the marketplace, a reasonable profit is $30, or reasonable value is $30. Then when you see the price of the Boulanger going to $8 to $90, the government will buy most of the Boulangers from the farmers at the best prices they can get them, and then make that produce available on the market. It's a form of subsidy, but it also protects and shields the population from being exploited. And that will happen with most commodities, basic commodities. We will also, in tandem with that, give vouchers to the more vulnerable members of our society who we know are struggling to be able to survive. Because none of our citizens should ever be in the position where they're struggling for food. And I just want to explain that. There's a big difference between what they call food sovereignty. The country has a lot of food, but there's a question of, is there food accessibility? In other words, can the citizens access the food? And that comes with the question of cost. That's why you want to bring that down. Finally, in the interior, where both the indigenous and the mining operations, a gallon of gas on the coast costs $800, let's say. That same gallon of gas, and I was in the Upper Mazaruni recently, costs $2,500 to $3,000 per gallon. So clearly the people in the interior are paying about 3 times the value of gas. To be able to address that, the government just has to get into the business of moving gas from the coast to the interior, so that you make the price in the interior almost the same as the price on the coast, and the government will pay for the transportation of large amounts of fuel to the interior. That means whether you build out guy oil and you put up large tank farms, whether you fly that fuel in every week, 40,000 gallons, or whether you move that in, once the state is absorbing most of that cost, then the cost of living in the interior comes down, because instead of paying $2,400 per gallon, you're now going to be paying $900 per gallon. And therefore, everything else in the interior, the price will come down. And so farmers, et cetera, those people who are growing produce to bring to the coast, that brings down the cost of living. And those are some of the main areas. I mean, there are many others, but we can start there. We have a whole 10-region infrastructure plan.
Thank you so much indeed. I mean, you've covered almost everything that I want to ask about, but obviously there's still some more, which are very core and important for listeners to understand. Let's start with, and you've made some issues very much public, just like you've done a moment ago. And I'd like to start off with corruption eradication, which is something you spoke about and you continue to speak about on platforms, which is a plague that is continuously hitting the country, and we are being condemned for it. What is your vision for eradicating corruption in Guyana?
Okay, I want to start off with a caveat. You can't eradicate corruption. Christ's most close disciple was Judas. And Judas took 30 pieces of silver to sell Christ out. So I don't want to start with an unrealistic objective. What I think we could do is serious damage to corruption. That starts by holding the people who are in decision-making positions, who take incentives to make a particular decision, not only holding them accountable, but making sure that they pay the penalties for their actions. So, for example, the Integrity Commission, which is supposed to monitor the assets of persons holding public office, it doesn't even have enough money to pay a full-time staff of 15, 20 people to investigate. We need to have the best qualified forensic experts available to us, if we have to hire them from the region or outside, to come and start to people the Integrity Commission. We need to enter into treaties with countries where we know people hide money and how they move money. You can't move $200-300 million US over a period of time and hide it globally without leaving a paper trail. And so by those treaties, we are going to say to a lot of those countries, if you want to continue to do business in a prosperous Guyana, if you want your financial institutions to have relations with us, you are going to have to disclose information that on activities that have hurt Guyana. If people are taking our money and salting it away and they haven't provided the services for it, we need to be able to access that money. We need to be able to prosecute those people. They are entitled to have the best legal defense they would like. And we also want to say to those countries, if we don't have enough evidence here in Guyana, but you have evidence over there of their malfeasance in public office or misfeasance in public office, you can prosecute them and we will provide the support. Because at the end of the day, this money belongs to the state. It doesn't belong to these individuals. So one of the things we will certainly do is strengthen the investigative capacity of the Integrity Commission. A lot of new forensic experts as well as qualified people. We know we don't have all of them here, so we're going to hire them in. 2, the prosecution of persons who fall under the Integrity Commission Act. We will have to hire top quality lawyers, including silk from overseas, to prosecute persons in which there is sufficient evidence that discloses how they are and what they have been doing with their office. And we have some obvious glaring examples. We've got people getting $890 million contracts who have never qualified before. How does that pass the tender procedure? We have cases where people get $600 million above the engineer's estimate. How does that pass the MPTAB? All those examples where clearly there are anomalies. The Heroes Highway, how do you build a road that's supposed to last for a minimum of 15 to 20 years and it's falling apart after 2 years? Where did that breakdown come? Did it come in the design? Did it come in the lack of supervision? Did it come in the provision of inadequate material? All of those matters have to be done. Now, it's going to be a huge task, but we have to make sure that we have the institutional capacity and the legal framework, which includes the international treaties that will allow us access to that sort of information. And in the case of the really large instances of corruption, we will hire the best international forensic teams to track that money and prosecute. But more importantly, we're not prosecuting is one thing. We want to recover the money. So we are going to go after getting the money that belongs to the state back in the hands of the state. So it's going to take a lot of that effort. And of course, demonstrably, as you come down the chain, the people taking bribes in the street, whether it's law enforcement organizations and other forms of petty corruption, they're going to go. And I want to assure people that you don't have to be corrupt to live a comfortable life in a country where we're making 900,000 barrels of oil a day and we have less than 1 million people. There is absolutely no need for corruption. Anything other than that is greed.
Police reform is rated by citizens as a priority issue. And for the next government, if it happens to be yours, what systems would you put into place to help to alleviate this claim by many citizens that there is reform that's necessary for the Guyana police force?
Well, the first thing with police reform is accountability. So one of the first institutions that we are going to establish is a civilian-led police integrity commission, which will be empowered and have investigators to investigate all allegations of misfeasance by law enforcement agencies. Again, they will be fully funded. They will have international assistance, and they will also have their own independent prosecutors who will prosecute allegations of police misconduct. So the whole idea that we have now of police investigating themselves and hoping that somehow or the other you will get a just result will be removed, because you'll have this civilian-led body. So it's not going to be under the control of the police like the Police Complaints Authority is. That, to me, is essential because, again, we're talking about running a first world country. We're not talking about running a rich third world country. Secondly, it is clear that the law enforcement institutions in this country need an entire restructuring. They're not taking advantage of the technology in every area. How could you possibly have all these cameras and have all these traffic offenses taking place and people are not being prosecuted in significant numbers? Basic things, huge sand trucks flying down the road at 70, 80 kilometers an hour. All of this stuff is captured on camera. You don't need a police officer present. All you need is the program that will pick up every single transgression in the case of traffic and have those people prosecuted, their licenses taken away, whether you adopt a harsh approach like 3 strikes and you're out and you lose your license. Weight and scales on the road. We can't have huge trucks bringing down aggregate and damaging the roads when we're building the roads for a certain tonnage, 8 tons per axle, and you have a 35-ton per axle truck coming down the road and expect the state to keep repairing the road so you can continue to keep making a profit. No. That's not the way how that goes. In terms of domestic violence, huge area. I heard yesterday that the president introduced a measure, which I think is useful, which is that they will give panic buttons to women who have either reported or are victims of domestic violence. We got to do better than that. We have to provide modern shelters with significant capacity in every region of the country so that where a woman is remotely threatened, she doesn't have to fear that at the end of that report she has to go back home into the same environment and hope to God that the man who has just violated her out of his good graces doesn't violate her again. They need to be able to move to comfortable family spaces where they can begin to seriously contemplate a new life if that's what they want to do, and they're not forced as a result of the economic circumstances to have to rush back to the man because the man is the person who's keeping them. Our citizens have to be able to make the best decisions in the best circumstances. So we certainly would make sure that we have a lot of DV homes all throughout the country. And the most important thing about domestic violence is data. We have to look at the data and analyze what the trigger spots are. We know that poverty may be one of them, but we have to look at where are you likely and where does the data disclose that there are high incidents of domestic violence, particularly those resulting in death. I am sure that there are common features throughout. And once we get that, it means in those areas which have high incidents, we have to make sure that we have the interventions, not just by the police, by the social services. A lot of this, of course, comes down to education, which is much longer term, but they can intervene. So if an officer goes to a home where there's been a report of domestic violence and the certain key signs are there, we need to extract that woman, transfer her to an unknown location, and make sure that we prosecute the person who either threatened or inflicted that damage. And, of course, look after the children who might have seen the trauma.
Interesting indeed, and we're getting some good comments from listeners across the world. But before we open up the lines, let me ask you about the public service. Mm-hmm. Are you satisfied with the quality and provision of service by our public service? And if there is anything, a Nigel Hughes administration, what would you do to bring it back to where it is expected to function as?
Okay. Thanks, Bobby. First thing, the public service traditionally that operated in the 60s and provided services all the way through to today, and what the demands on the public service and for services and goods, that has changed dramatically. We're in a new era that demands new skills. So it's easy. The first thing, of course, is that public servant salaries have to increase. But, of course, if you're increasing the salaries but you're not dealing with the cost of living, you're not really doing very much. But to come back to the public service, a lot of this world is going electronic. Artificial intelligence is going to drive a lot of the provision of goods and services going forward. So the type of public servant that you will need in the next 15 to 20 years is going to be significantly different to the type of public service that we have up to now. And it doesn't mean that you change the people in the public service. It means you have to retrain the people in the public service so that they are service-oriented and their efforts are directed towards the delivery of high-quality services to the public. Now, to get high-quality services in anything, in absolutely anything, you got to pay for it. You want a good doctor, you got to pay for it. You want a good lawyer, you got to pay for it. So the state, while making sure that it is providing competitive salaries for the public service, also needs to make sure that they are trained, updated in their skills, and transformed in their skills after we've done an assessment of what the requirements will be. I just want to use the GDF as an example. Our deterrent capacity on our western border is going to have to depend on modern warfare. It's not a question of having 5,000 men in boots standing up at various locations across Kaikan and various locations across the border. Modern warfare, just to pick the obvious example, drones. We now have to have soldiers who are of top quality capacity in terms of electronic warfare and current methods. We don't need to develop an army that can invade Venezuela. What we need to develop is an army that can inflict such pain on Venezuela that it doesn't consider invading Guyana. And to do that, you need a different type of soldier. You need a soldier that's qualified to the highest possible level in electronics, in technology, in data analysis, in AI, and therefore that will guide the kind of military equipment we need to concentrate on. So apart from buying satellite time, which is very obvious, it is the kind of equipment, the level of drones we will need to be able to disarm, for example, a Venezuelan military wing or their air force, so that we have that capacity as a small nation. So we have a highly technically qualified Guyana Defense Force. Now, people with those skills, if they were in the open market, will get a certain minimum salary. So we know that we have to be able to attract people of similar qualifications in the army. So we have to be able to compete at that rate. In addition to which, the existing standing army, we need to spend an awful lot of money training them into the new technology, or training them in the new technology, to be able to protect our western border. And that, of course, is going to be coupled with our diplomatic efforts. So in terms of diplomacy, we have to make sure, when we've had very high quality people in the diplomatic service up to relatively recently. You've had the Carl Greenidges, the Rashley Jacksons, the Sridhar Ramphals, etc. We need to make sure that we have a lot more of that skill here, so that our global diplomatic defense of our western border is of the highest possible quality. And we also have to model out what are the likely consequences. We know Venezuela has a lot more oil than Guyana, and if there's a regime change in Venezuela, will the U.S.'s position with Guyana remain the same vis-a-vis Venezuela? So we need the research capacity that is going to be able to tell us what the short, medium, and long-term objectives are, both for diplomatic and military defense of our western border. All of that is in the civil service.
All right, it's 32 minutes past the hour. We're speaking with leader of the Alliance for Change, Mr. Nigel Hughes, who's also the presidential candidate for that party. And our format did indicate that we'll open up the lines for you to call and ask Mr. Hughes a question which may be of concern to you. So you know our number. If you don't, it's 223-5483. 223-5483 is the number. And you have a question for Mr. Hughes, we'll definitely open up for you. Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
Could you speak up, please?
Yeah, two things. One is the crime situation. I didn't hear him speak about crime situation.
Okay.
So my take on the crime situation, especially guns. Once you get
No. Hold on. Like I said, you asked the question, and he's going to respond to the question. We're not taking comments and suggestions.
Okay.
We are asking Mr. Hughes questions, and he'll answer. So, Mr. Hughes, the first one is on crime. Your take on crime. Thank you, sir.
Certainly. Again, on crime, with small communities, we should not have serious crime. The technology is there to track most criminal activity, whether it's electronic crime, banking fraud, or whether it's actual physical crime. If you've got high quality cameras on most of the lantern posts in this city and in Linden and in Criverton and in wherever, they're not expensive, there's absolutely no reason with a bank of facial recognition why any sort of physical crime should not be solved within a short period of time. The violent offenders who are coming with guns into your home, again, with the cameras, how difficult is it going to be to track anybody within a short period of time in Guyana? You're not talking about New York City, and even in New York City and London, which have very intensive camera surveillance, they pick people up very quickly. And this is not expensive or new technology. So we need to invest. We can't have police stations telling people when you call for them that they don't have vehicles. What excuse at 900,000 barrels a day do we have to not having a fully equipped Guyana police force that responds instantly? If you call in the middle of Sophia, Beefield, the police should be there in less than 3 minutes, because that's the kind of force you have to build out, and you have the technology. So even as you are reporting that incident, the police must have the cameras to see it. This has got to be it. 10 years ago, I went with my wife to China on a trip, and we went to Shanghai. Shanghai has 25 million people, and we were in the police headquarters, in which we saw they had, 200-300 cameras, and they could shut Shanghai down if there was an incident in less than 5 minutes, shutting people down from leaving that city through their 15-20 exits they have, and through pure photo technology, they can pick up that suspect. How difficult is it to do that for every city and town in this country and find the culprits and prosecute them?
All right. Good morning. All right, we seem to have lost that caller. But as we go on, Mr. Hughes, another question here in the interim. Political path. Cheddy Jagan and Forbes Burnham, despite being political adversaries, found ways to meet and agree on critical issues. In fact, they used the term critical support. Today's political leaders seem unable to duplicate such an arrangement. How would your party in Parliament pursue critical issues with your political adversaries?
I'm so happy that you've asked that question. When I was privileged enough to have been elected leader of the Alliance for Change back in late June, early July last year, I said, look, there are 5 critical areas to the development of this country upon which we must have cross-political support, because we need to remove these from the political back and forth and have 10 to 15-year plans. I've actually adjusted that to 15 to 20 years plans. And I said that these 5 areas, I would immediately reach out to the opposition and say, look, let's develop, by consensus, 10 to 15-year plans in which we all sign off. And even though we will compete in the intervening electoral cycles, the principles are there. So the easy one, education. If we decide what the goals are for our education system at the end of 10 years, at the end of 15 years, across the political divide, and we identify the goalposts along the way, let's sign off on that policy. We could compete on the outreaches of it. But at least we know that we are developing this quality student after this period of time. The other 4 areas were the economy. Clearly, we need to have political consensus in the development of the economy. You can't have, every time you change a government, the economy running in different directions. If there are overall infrastructural plans that we all agreed on, then that would be necessary. Of course, foreign affairs, for obvious reasons, the problems we have both with Venezuela and also with Suriname. Health, the nation's health, we should agree across the political divide. And finally, poverty reduction. And certainly, if I were privileged enough at any stage to be elected as leader of the country, that's the first thing I will do. I'll reach out and say, look, let us acknowledge none of us has all of the requisite skills needed to develop the country. These 5 areas, let's take them out of the political competition, agree a 10 to 15-year plan. We set up the commission, we approve it, we sign off. We could compete in the little intricacies. You want to put a secondary school here or something there, but the overall fundamentals are the same. Secondly, and I just want to give this as an example, since 2020, other than the problems that we have had on the border with Venezuela, I don't know of the president reaching out to the leader of the opposition, Mr. Aubrey Norton, on any occasion to talk about the economic development of the country. We cannot possibly have a country where a person that gets 50.5 or 51% or even gets 55% of the vote can make all the decisions without any consultation with the other 45, 49% of the population. And it certainly is the ultimate insult to come and say to the population, look, I have done well. I've given you a road here. I've done stuff in your community, and therefore vote for me, even though nobody has consulted any member of any community about whether or not the development they are telling you you must accept is either relevant or that's how they would want it done. We have to build a culture in which everybody is involved in the decision making. And for an Alliance for Change government, I certainly plan to meet with and involve the opposition on a regular basis, every 6 weeks, whether it's every 2 months, on development issues. And also, most fundamentally, give them access to the same information I have, so that when we make a decision and say this is what we're doing, we're not hiding the information. All the data must be available to the citizens of this country to examine and cross-examine us on that. So that's certainly one of the key areas of governance. This last one, if I could, on the Chancellor and the Chief Justice, it is an absolute embarrassment for 20 plus years that we can't have a substantive Chancellor and Chief Justice. Our proposal is to all parties, let's pass a constitutional amendment that says, look, where the leader of the opposition and the president cannot agree on the candidates for Chancellor and Chief Justice, let's send it up to the Caribbean Judicial Services Commission, because they already identify and choose all the judges for the CCJ, which is our highest court. So if we politically are at an immature level that we can decide who should be the substantive Chancellor and Chief Justice, let the President send up his recommendation, let the leader of the opposition send up his, and let them send up the reasons why they have chosen the respective candidates, and then let the CCJ, the Caribbean Court of Justice Services Commission, Legal Services Commission, make the determination on the presentations that they've made.
Thank you indeed. Do we have a caller?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'd just like to have Mr. Hughes' views on...
Could you speak up a little bit, please? Speak up a little bit, please.
Could Mr. Hughes share with us his views on the strengthening of the Guyana dollar?
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Very, very, very good question. As we know, the Guyana dollar is artificially maintained at the level at which it is. It is the governor of the central bank who is in control of all of the foreign currency that we earn as income, oil and otherwise, that determines how much of that foreign currency he is actually going to repatriate to Guyana. So in other words, the dollar is not on the open market. It's a question of the policy of the central bank. If we float the dollar, there have been arguments for and against that. If we truly float the dollar, there are arguments for and against that. One, Guyana does not export significant amounts of any product to generate foreign currency. That's why it is absolutely critical that we develop the non-oil economy, because that's the real economy that we have to balance the books on, not the oil economy. That's you can't mix the two up. So in terms of strengthening the dollar, that has to be driven by what our policies are going to be. Because if the dollar is too strong, we can't sell our rice competitively or whatever else we produce competitively on the global market. So I would take the advice of the best economic advisors, and this is one of the things that we will establish, a state planning commission, which will have world-class economists from international universities as well as Guyana, who I will take their advice as to what the short, medium, and long-term fiscal plan should be for strengthening the Guyana dollar, because it has to come in tandem with the increase in production in the non-oil sector. And that is going to require some pretty nifty financial management. So I wouldn't say automatically we strengthen the dollar. it has to be balanced against our developmental needs.
Thank you very much. Question from, I think we have another caller. Hello?
Yep.
Good morning.
Hello?
Hello, yes, go ahead.
Yes, a boatload of gold was go to Curacao. And when Mr. Hughes become president, if he should become president, what are you going to do about it?
All right.
Sir, I don't know the full circumstances of the boatload of gold going to Curacao, but I rather suspect what you're talking about is gold smuggling. Gold smuggling is at huge levels in Guyana. The price of gold has gone up and the amount of gold produced has gone down, which defies logic, which means a lot of gold is being smuggled. To be able to combat gold smuggling, you have to have very, very effective interventions. So we know where most of this gold is going. Like I said, in this modern world, gold just can't turn up in the international market. There's nothing that goes on in any part of this world that you can buy satellite time to track. So whether boats are going to Curacao and there's no economic justification for it going there, saving except something illegal, then we have to be able to use that intelligence to track where it is. So that will be a combination of increasing our enforcement capacity as well as following the data. Now, because gold smuggling is so profitable, clearly the bribes for the law enforcement agencies are going to be increased. And so we need to have a combination of technology and the relationships with our partners that encourages them to assist us to track those people who are exploiting the country.
You know, one of the things that have been of concern in many instances was this adversarial relationship between the Georgetown municipality and the government. It has brought us to the point where we've gotten a knot when it comes to establishing Guyana or Georgetown as the Garden City. What will a huge administration do in terms of fixing this whole issue of bringing back our Garden City?
Okay. That brings us to the larger question of how does the municipality get enough revenue and resources to be able to manage a capital city for the people who use it and live in it. And that has to be removed from political interference. It should never be up to a Hughes administration to decide what the city council gets in Georgetown. That should be a formula worked out on the population, the occupants, the people who come into the city, and that should be a direct charge on the consolidated fund that goes directly to the city council. So the president or the minister of home affairs or local government cannot intervene, because if you got 600,000 people living in Georgetown, and we know that these are the basic needs for them in terms of drainage, garbage, traffic solutions, then for the city council to be able to manage the city, it needs the resources based on the people who are there. And so that formula should be enshrined in law, and they get a direct transfer. So I can't wake up as president and say, oh, I don't like who the mayor of Georgetown is, therefore I'm not giving them the resources, or I'm going to suddenly send in the garbage collectors. No. If you want a modern Guyana, and I keep trying to share with our citizens, I want you to think of a modern Guyana, not an improved version of what we have that is a poor third world country with a lot of money. We have to reach the stage where goods and services are standard at the highest quality to all citizens, irrespective of their political affiliation. And so no politician, certainly for me, I would pass the laws, I would seek to have the laws passed, I should say, that allows any political interference in that transfer. And then it's up to the city council to deliver those services. If they don't, then people vote them out.
Excellent indeed. Good morning.
Morning.
Your question, please, for Mr. Hughes.
Oh, yes. The Guyana Defense Force will celebrate 60 years this year. And there are thousands and thousands of veterans out there. Many of them are destitute. I would like Mr. Hughes to tell the nation what will the AFC do for those veterans. A lot of them are destitute.
Thank you.
I thank you for that question, and let me share with you my absolute horror of how our veterans are treated. My office is located in what you would call a depressed community in Working Ross. And every day I see people who are victims of substance abuse who serve this country as military officers. And therefore, for me, it is the worst indication of a state if it fails to treat with its veterans. There is no person who has served this country under an AFC administration who will not be identified and the requisite level of financial, social, and psychological support given to them to ensure that in their remaining years they enjoy the best quality life. Now, you may say that that is theoretical, what it means in practical servicing. So in practical terms, housing. We should not have ex-servicemen, unless they are intentionally criminal or deviant, not provided with the best quality housing. One of the key aspects of our program for the joint services is to provide modern housing in middle to upper income areas with parks and gyms. And so we will provide housing and support for our veterans who have served. We can't expect them to go and serve now in the remaining years they have. They have to have access to the highest quality health service. So when they turn up at our public health institutions, they are treated as one of the list of priority patients in dealt with housing in terms of sustenance. Again, when we examine their circumstances, we will establish veteran homes and institutions where they can go and actually get 2 square meals a day at the expense of the state once they are veterans who have served. That is the minimum level of support and respect we can give to people who have given their lives to this country. I'm sorry, but that to me is just basic.
Thank you, sir. Good morning.
Good morning to you, sir.
Could you turn your radio down, please?
I have a question.
You have to turn your radio down, ma'am. Go ahead.
Every day you go to do business at various entities in the city, the ministry, different places. The question I'm asking, would Mr. Hughes include in his first 100 days changes and of the rules of the way things are being done? When persons go to do business at certain entities, you spend all day, you spend half day, and yet still you can't do with what it is you go there to do.
Well, Mr. Hughes, if you were listening, he talked about the public service. You noticed that I asked him that question, but I'll still give him the opportunity to expand if he desires.
I thank you for that question, madam. And let me just give you the most basic of examples. Pensioners. There's absolutely no reason why a pensioner should have to leave their house to stand up outside the post office to get their pension. The technology is there to just transfer that money into their account. In remote areas in the country, MMG is available. We should make sure all the people in the hinterland areas, in the indigenous communities, have access to be able to get electronic money. And that brings me to what is really going to be the raison d'etre of government services. If you run the government, your responsibility is to deliver the highest quality service in the shortest period of time. And the way the world is going, people don't have to physically come and line up and sit down and wait half a day and hope somebody call you out the line and pay the guard to move you up the line. All of those services should be done electronically, passports, everything. And we need to decentralize. People should not have to come to Georgetown to get basic government services. In all 10 regions, and in some regions like Region 1 and Region 10, you need more than one major government service provider located in that region. So all the basic services which you require from the government, from pensions, from passports, from of course, ID cards, all of that can be provided in your region. As you know, there are large communities, Kokwani, they don't have a bank. If those people want cash, they got to drive, 2-3 hours to Linden? No. We must migrate the country to the forms of electronic financial transactions so people have their money. Most people have mobile phones now. And therefore, this is part of the transformation of moving Guyana from where it is to a modern first world country where you don't have to walk around and travel large distances, especially older people. to get government services. The government services should really be brought to you in your home. That's the kind of migratory transformational view and vision we have for a modern Guyana, which is not difficult, by the way. You don't have to wait 5 years for that. This is the technology is there.
All right, we have another caller. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Bobby Vera, and good morning, Mr. Nigel Hughes.
Morning.
We've been hearing for a long time now, every time there's election, that people are getting charged, put before the court for things that they are being accused of, right? But then suddenly, so everything goes back on ice. Is there a way to change the Constitution that arrests executive leaders for corruption?
You have a lot of questions. You have a lot of issues going on in that question. You say people coming towards election time get arrested and charged, but you didn't identify for what offenses. So it's difficult for me to respond to that if I don't know specifically what offenses they get arrested for. What I will say is I understand that there is a plan afoot to arrest a lot of young men or young people who may not be in favor of the government coming close to the election, because, of course, what they do is if they arrest you the day before the election, the government has 72 hours, or the police have 72 hours to keep you in custody. So if you arrest throughout the country 1,000 people, 100 people in every region, or however you mix it up, that's 1,000 less votes. And you're not going to, the chances of every one of them being able to hire a lawyer to get them out in time to vote is difficult. So I understand there's a plan, but I'm not sure when you say a lot coming close to the elections, people get arrested. But that's an example. In terms of the executive leadership of the country being held culpable, I will say one of the proposals in terms of constitutional change, which for us, again, is high priority because we have a crazy system, is that we remove some of the immunities of the president so that the president becomes liable for acts which they conduct that are outside of the law and outside of the Constitution. I just want to take advantage of the opportunity to talk about constitutional change. Our crazy Constitution says if one party gets 30% of the vote and all the other parties get less than 30% of the vote, that party that gets 30% of the vote gets 100% of the power and all the executive power. So imagine you can have under the Guyana Constitution a president elected by 1/3 of the population who under the Constitution has the right to appoint all the ministers, all the executive power. And we know that there will never be another no-confidence vote because the Caribbean Court of Justice said to have a no-confidence vote, all the members of the National Assembly have to attend and vote. Now, any government which is facing a no-confidence vote will tell some of the MPs to stay away, and therefore you don't have a no-confidence vote that is possible. So we now have this crazy situation where a government can get 30 to 35% of the vote, get all the executive power, and rule for 5 years without risk of being removed. And the only areas in which you can curtail their activity is either not voting for the budget or not voting for them when they want to raid the National Resource Fund. But for all intents and purposes, they can rule with a full cabinet, full powers of appointment all the way through with 30% of the vote. I just want to compare that to Suriname. In Suriname, the president cannot become president unless he or she gets 60% of the votes of the members of parliament. Now, that means that you can't have a partisan agenda that only dealing with a certain set of people. It means you have to have policies that will address the concerns of most of the people in the country to be able to get 60% of the vote of the members of parliament. And so if we are really serious about building a modern country that is of the highest standing international standards at the moment, we have to reform that. Otherwise, we really are completely wasting time.
All right, we've callers gone, and we're just about out of time. But before we do so, let me... Andrew wanted to ask a question. Yeah, go right ahead, Andrew.
Yeah,
our technical operator here.
Nigel, one of the biggest obstacles to our election integrity is GCOM. Mm-hmm. What would you do different to modernize it, and would you still have it the way it is, or would you get rid of it entirely?
GCOM is constructed in a flawed manner. How can you have the body responsible for carrying out the electoral laws peopled by persons appointed by the two major political parties? GCOM should be a professional body. It shouldn't consist of commissioners appointed by any political parties. It should be a professional body of the highest standards that we can go and challenge like there is anywhere else in the Caribbean. But because we have this political divide, which translates into an ethnic divide, we believe that the commission must have half the government nominees and half the opposition nominees. We're in a position now where the AFC has no nominee on the commission. Amanza has no nominee in the commission. WIN, which is extremely popular to people at the moment, has no nominee in the commission. So just structurally, it has to change. We have to get a professional GCOM, and then we can't have this huge battle that we have as to who is chairman, because what you're really hoping for is that the person you put there is more likely to vote in your favor than the other side's favor. How can you possibly have an electoral body that is responsible for counting votes and delivering a fair election peopled by political appointees? Not possible.
Last but not least, and I know we've had it and we've been going, and thank you so much again, Gas to Shore project. Do you think we've gotten the bang for our buck that has been invested so far, and your thoughts on where we're headed with this particular project?
Forgive me making light. We got a big bang, but it certainly was not for the buck. That project is a complete failure. It was supposed to deliver cheap electricity by 2025. We are $2 million in the hole, and there is not anything looking like 10% of the physical infrastructure at the location at Wales. That to me is criminal. It's worse than the Skeldon factory. You know, $2 billion US dollars in cost. You are facing an arbitration where your exposure is over 100 million US dollars. Imagine the contractors can probably just win the arbitration and decide they're not going ahead with the project because they already got $100 million as an award from the arbitrator. And we don't have laws that make the people who made the criminal decision in relation to where they're going to locate it, despite what the data says, fail to provide the contractor with the minimum amount of data and ask if we're getting bang for the buck. Clearly, we're not. And because we don't have access to the data, and we don't have a parliament in which the members of parliament and the responsible ministers are compelled to release all the information, we should have the right of freedom to that information. We are getting royally banged, I hate to say. That's what's happening to us.
Excellent conversation. And as we're about to wrap up, Mr. Hughes, I know you've got a busy day ahead of you, but I'll give you the opportunity for any closing statements or remarks you'd like to make to our listeners.
First of all, thank you, Bobby, for affording me the opportunity to share this morning with your listeners. I really do appreciate it. What I want to say to people is this. This is going to be an exceedingly consequential election. And the question is not who traditionally has been there for their side of the fence or who has been there to highlight why their people have been exploited or have not been given a fair share. To be able to run a modern Guyana, you need the people who have the intellectual capacity, the ideas, and the processes and programs that will create a modern Guyana. I dare say, I believe that the Alliance for Change has advanced most, if not all of those ideas. Everything from every 18-year-old getting access, being given a house lot, the free, under Mr. Granger's administration, we did have the free transportation to school, the uniforms, the most important thing, the National Skills Academy, which is voluntary national service. And in terms of business, we didn't even touch business. It's certainly for the development of the non-oil sector, we have to be able to create multi-billion-dollar Guyana companies multi-billion US dollar companies that originate in Guyana that can start to compete, first of all, in the Caribbean, in all the sectors, financial, manufacturing, etc., and then go on to become global giants. DDL, for example, which is one of our premier companies, I would like to see that company grow to become a global brand. And that's the kind of environment we have to do that we have to create. And that's what the Alliance for Change is about. And again, my appreciation and thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hughes, and all success at the upcoming elections.
Thank you, Bobby. Once you remember to vote for the key.
All right. This is Light FM.
Okay, just thank you for just allowing me the last 30 seconds. I would like to invite everybody. If you physically can't make it to our rally in Linden tomorrow at 4 p.m. at the bus park, join us online. You will hear the range, the breadth, the depth that the AFC has to guide this country forward. And I invite you all to join us. Thank you again.
Thank you.